Hi everybody, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here, and today we're going to conclude our look at some of my games from the recently completed Indiana State Championship, where, I won, or I tied for first, and am at least co-champion with a better tie breaks, so kind of 3/4 champion here. Anyway, as I said, this is my last round game here, and I had white, and let's go and take a look. Now, it's a very interesting game. I started off with a very significant advantage, and but managed to go downhill and had to kind of scrap. So it's kind of an up and down game, and also one which is again very tactical. Now I remember, I don't know if it was here or someplace, where some viewer complained that my shows tend to be tactical. You know, what can I say? If you don't like them in general, you're going to hate this game because it becomes pure tactics at a certain point. Okay, well here we go. E4, E5, Bishop C4. The guy told me that he plays a lot of gambits, so I decided, all right, I'll try to play something that avoids gambits. So played this. And the idea was sometimes you can go into a King's Gambit decline kind of position. Sometimes you go into kind of a Ruy Lopez sort of position. So there are a number of ways you can play it. I mean, it's not that you're going to necessarily play like the Yurosov Gambit, or definitely not going to play anything like the Matrix. So again, it's just kind of a flexible sort of opening, and it was a way to try to avoid certain goofy systems. Okay, so D6 is a little bit weird. I could play Knight F3 and go into a Philidor. I mean, you can play like this, but if you're playing against a Philidor, you'd rather play D4 than Bishop C4. It's, I would say, certainly a little bit more testing. So I decided to just play D3 and continue with the kind of possible Ruy Lopez or King's Gambit declined approach. Okay, so he played Knight F6. I played Knight C3. And now, little surprise, he played Bishop to E6. But in fact, I think this really isn't so bad. I decided to take, but maybe it's better to play Knight G to E2 and allow the doubling of pawns if you want, and you get a pretty nice grip over some light squares. So I thought about this, but thought that, okay, by taking and then playing F4, that this should be probably good for at least maybe a micro edge. I felt that, okay, if he plays E takes F4, Bishop F4, then plays E5, my dark squared bishop is a little bit better than his. I mean, his is kind of locked in behind his pawns, while mine has a bit of free reign. I have a very, very small space and development advantage. So, okay, not really much of a development advantage. It's just the usual white half a tempo. But okay, I felt like I would have at least a little something here. But interestingly, after F4, he played Knight C6, and then after Knight to F3, played Queen D7. So he's still trying to find some way to keep the position sharp, and I think it's actually kind of interesting what he's up to. I castled, and then he castled long, and all right. So here I have to figure out what exactly I'm going to do about his kind of unusual opening. It's unusual, but it's not so clear how I can really exploit this. So, okay, some moves I looked at, and you actually might want to stop the recording at this point and try to think up whatever seems to be best to you. So I'll show you more or less the lines along which I was thinking. So first thing I thought of course, was to play D4. But I wasn't so sure about this because he plays ED, Knight D4, and then D5. And the problem is not just the pressure against my center, but that Bishop to C5 might be kind of annoying in a lot of variations. So, okay. Next thing I thought of, or another thing I thought of, I don't know that it was in this order, but I also considered the move B4. Both to try to open up some lines on the queen side and cause a little trouble over there, and also, okay, if he plays E takes F4, I can play B5, and if he plays Knight B4, then, well, this would be nice. Of course, there's the problem. Queen to D4 is check, and I'm losing, well, a lot of material here. Well, maybe I can get away with just losing a knight, but still, that's pretty bad. Okay, another thought would be to play F takes E5, D takes E5, and Bishop to E3, so I don't let him get the diagonal, but he has Knight to G4. So putting all of these together and realizing that in every case the cure can be the same, I played King to H1. So now, if I play b4 and all of that, queen of d4 is in check. Might be bad anyway, but at least it doesn't have that problem. Maybe I have knight f7, queen c3, bishop d2, and then I take the rook. So that could be played. Also on d4, in that line with the double exchange, there's no bishop to c5, pinning my knight on d4 to the king. Also on fe5, de5, bishop e3, knight g4, my bishop can go back to g1. So all this makes sense. I will point out one other possibility, though, which is just to play rook to b1. And that takes the rook off of the any check tricks with the queen on d4. It keeps the pawn on b4 protected. So this is actually pretty sensible and is a reasonable alternative. Anyway, I played king h1. He played h6. A little bit funny, but of course his idea is to maybe take on f4 and play g5. Also keeps my knight off of g5, but it's creating some other holes. Maybe I could play knight h4 and then f5. That might be a reasonable way to go. Anyway, I chose to play d4 after thinking for a while. I'm not sure that this is best, so I think here you should take anyway. Knight d4, d5, and then here I have two possibilities. So e5 might be okay. He plays knight e4, probably play bishop to e3, and black has various things that he can do here, including the kind of showy bishop to a3. Probably white should just ignore this with f5, and it's a very unclear position. Okay. What I probably would have played instead was f5, though. And for this, I think I did need... yeah, I'm pretty sure I needed to play king h1 for this, because then bishop c5, bishop e3, e5 would be very bad. So, after f5 here, e takes f5, ef5, knight d4, queen d4, c5, and maybe something like queen d3. And I wasn't really sure how to assess this position. I'm still not entirely sure, but probably black is equal, maybe even a tiny bit better. So I think his central control is certainly important here. And even if I can put my bishop on a nice square like f4, I think he's basically in good shape. So again, perhaps for these reasons, maybe d4 isn't best. But it's not bad. Anyway, it worked out when he played e takes f4. Maybe he expected me to play bishop takes f4 and then he plays g5, g4, but I threw in d5. And now he's in bad shape. So he played knight e7, I took, e5, bishop e3. And here I really feel like I have everything. I mean, this is like just a fantastic King's Indian for white. Okay, why a King's Indian? Well, the central structure is kind of similar. Unfortunately, my pawn is on c2 rather than c4, so it's not going to help with the pawn storm. But basically, I've got a very easy plan of attack on the queen side. His king side play is extremely slow, and he doesn't have a light squared bishop to help either. So white is just much, much better in this position. And for a while I played just, natural good moves and increased my advantage. Well, okay. The phrase increased my advantage doesn't really make any sense in a strict sense, because if I'm winning 10 moves from now, it means I'm winning here if my opponent didn't do anything wrong. But I'm making the position more obviously advantageous in terms of the appearance. Okay, so he plays king to b8, which is sensible, with the idea of knight c8, kind of the counterpart to Bent Larson's old couplet, a knight on f8 and you never get mate. So something similar here. The knight on c8 is a really good defender, and it's going to make it hard for me to deliver mate. On the other hand, black is extremely passive here. So I progress. a4, bishop e7, a5 is possible, but I played b4. Well, one reason is that if black ever plays the move c6, I wanted to be able to take and play b5 and just rip open lines as fast as possible. So, all right, he played g5. And here I played b5, and I think this is right. The computer, and I think this is true on both Fritz and Ribka, are infatuated by a5, followed by a6. But I just don't really get this. I mean, okay, black plays b6, and it's not at all likely that I'm going to be able to exploit the c6 square anytime soon. So, a5, a6 is interesting if my plan is to more or less abandon the queen side for quite a while and just go for kingside play, I think. Just try to take advantage of my positional trumps and use the pawn on a6 as an advantage for the endgame. But I think it really puts a stop to my attacking prospects. So I like b5. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Knight h5, a5, and I'm angling for b6, of course, not a6. So g4, knight to d2, bishop g5, and okay, I really felt around this point, actually a few moves earlier, that this was just rabbit stew coming up, and kind of along the lines of the old skit from Monty Python's Holy Grail. And those of you who have seen that movie all know what happens to the guy who says, rabbit stew coming right up. He becomes the victim of said rabbit. So this almost happens to me. So at this point, I'm starting to think a little bit. I'm not entirely sure what to do. See, the fact that my opponent doesn't have a light squared bishop anymore really kind of fixated me on the idea of just not worrying about what he's doing on the king side until he plays g3, and then I just play h3. And since he has no light squared bishop to worry about, I don't have to worry about sacrifices on h3. So everything is great. But now I'm realizing, okay, his idea is to swap off the dark squared bishops, and then to play g3, and when I play h3 to play knight f4, and then sacrifice on h3. And I still didn't take it too seriously just yet, but if I had, this might have been a good place to kind of stop and switch gears, maybe play the move g3. And okay, well, this obviously stops that plan. The drawback is that now perhaps black can go for h5, h4 at some point. But it looks as if this is awfully slow and not so easy for him to achieve. So first of all, I can't play knight f6 right now because I would just take the bishop on g5 and then take the knight. Whoops. So just illustrate. And, of course, wins. So if he can't play knight f6, he's got to make some kind of move to prepare it, like queen at g7, for instance. Okay, well now, again, there are choices, and it's tough to find a win for white here. I mean, it looks as if, even though my position is really promising, it's kind of hard to break through. So I'll show you some lines. For instance, knight to c4. Okay, and now maybe rook d to f8 is good. And then here, for instance, okay, I'm tempted by bishop takes a7 check, just trying to blast the position open here. But okay, king a7, b6, king back, and a knockout blow is rather hard to deliver. So for instance, if a6, then cb, a7, king a8, let's say rook f8, just so he doesn't divert my rook, and now knight b5. And as long as black is careful here, I just run out of gas. So bishop to d8 is a good move, overprotecting both c7 and b6. And, white can take this, but after queen c7 here, white's attack is just at an end. It's hopeless. Okay, so after king to b8 instead of a6, b takes c7 is better. But this is probably only good for a draw. So queen c7, say a6, b6, knight b5, queen c5, check, and now knight to b2. So white would like to get rid of the queen and play knight to c7 check, but of course black can do things in the meanwhile. And okay, here queen to e3 looks sufficient, and there's nothing more than a perpetual check in this kind of funny variation. Alright, so that's a really direct approach. It's not that surprising that it doesn't work. Better is just to play bishop g1. So preserve this bishop, but still, okay, black swaps, plays the second rook over to f8, and I can trade and play king g2, and of course I'm better here, but with material getting kind of limited, the advantage is, it's always there. I mean, I'm going to be better here practically no matter what, but I'm not sure how big of an advantage it is. So certainly I can torture him indefinitely, but whether it's enough to win, I'm not sure. Okay, so that was a quick look at knight to c4. Let's look at the standard idea here with b6. And here too, I don't think I win. So takes a6. Okay, this is the basic setup. We'll see it later on in the game. And okay, so here I think white has two main approaches. So one is to try to keep the bishop, the dark squared bishop. So for example, bishop to g1, takes. And now let's say black plays knight f6 so we can get the h5, h4 plan going. So queen e2, h5, queen c4, rook d to f8. The threat here is if it's white to move, see if you can figure it out. It's to play rook f6, queen f6, queen c7, king a8. And now white has to have something good because queen f3 mate is threatened, but just rook takes a6. b7, and then, oh, sorry, that's mate. I was trying to play king a7 and then mate next move, but the bishop on g1 makes it mate straight away. Okay, so that's the threat. So for that reason, rook d to f8 makes sense. We don't want to use the other rook because we're going to use it on the h-file. All right, and so now, it's not clear that white really has anything great. h4 is threatened, so maybe bishop to f2, but that's really kind of ugly. Then knight h7, and black is going to jump on the f-file, and white has very little here. All right, so instead of bishop to g1, which is, it would be nice if we could do it, but maybe we can't. So let's look at knight to c4. Okay, so now if knight f6, then we keep the bishop, and on h5, white has something very good here. Rook takes a6, and then knight a5. All right. But bishop takes e3 is best. And, okay, knight e3, knight f6. And I think basically white has a positional advantage here, but again, it's very hard to prove anything. And, I came up with a lot of analysis, but ultimately white never manages to crash through. So rather than go through a ton of it, just basically make the point that white is certainly positionally better here, but it's not hard. It's not easy at all to deliver mate. So back to the game. Instead of g3, I played knight c4, and my opponent played g3. And now here I'm still in good shape, but I got a little too nervous here. So again, I realized my originally intended plan of playing h3 is just not very good here. So if bishop takes e3, I probably have to play queen takes e3, because if I play knight e3, then knight f4, queen d2, knight h3, takes, king g1, g2, and I saw this during the game, rook h to g8, followed by rook to g3, and of course doubling, and black is maybe even winning here. So for example, rook a3, rook g3, and white is just pinned, in every direction here. So this is winning for black, I think. So after h3, bishop e3, queen e3 seems to be forced, but still, knight f4. And if I take on g3, then rook, the rook comes to g8. That's terrible. But rook f3 is a nice move, so I don't think I saw this. So this enables me to keep a little advantage, but not much. Knight h3, rook g3, knight f4. And with the open g-file and the possibility still of the h-pawn running, this is not great for white. Maybe it's okay for white, but definitely not great. Okay, so back here. Another move I thought about was a typical King's Indian trick to play bishop to g1, and then after g takes h2, to move the bishop away again. But there just seem to be too many lines that are open. And I could play bishop h2, but bishop f4, and again, black is getting good counterplay. One possibility is just to play b6, just kind of, close my eyes and go forward. And this might be okay. But probably the best move, which I did consider, but I don't recall why I rejected it, was queen to d1. So bishop takes e3, knight takes e3. Probably what I didn't see or didn't really take seriously was that after knight f4, h takes g3 is in fact very strong. So these pawns, even though the h-file is kind of half open, it's not really important here, and these pawns are actually very, very good. So this would be great for me. Better is queen to e8, but still, rook to f5, say knight g7, rook f3, g takes h2, and this is, I would say, a much better version of what I get in the game. And then here I can play a6 or go for b6 later on, and try to use those advantages. So here a6 maybe makes a little bit more sense. Play knight a2, knight b4, and try to make sure I end up with something good happening on the c6 square. All right. So instead I chose rook to f5. And, one idea is to keep his queen kind of locked out. Another thought was maybe after bishop takes e3, maybe I would play rook takes h5. I wasn't sure about that. I don't know if I would have done that, but I was considering it. And if he played knight to g7, then I would play rook to f3. And I would, again, force his knight back to an inferior square. So anyway, though he took, and now I played bishop to f2. So I thought this might be a slightly better version of the bishop g1 line that I mentioned before. So the rook is kind of clogging things up on f5. But, on the other hand, it's also, it can be a bit of a target there. Though I also saw some lines where its being a target might be a little bit trappy. Okay, now one funny line here is this. Okay, if knight to f1, knight to f4. Okay, try to figure out where white's queen should go in this position. What's the best square for her? Okay, well, one idea, natural moves to play queen f3. I mean, this looks pretty sane. But then knight to e7, rook f7, queen e8, and what do you know? My rook is trapped. I can try for a little play with b6, but my opponent would just take and play a6, and I have to cough up the exchange. Well, what's the difference? I would have played queen to f1. And now the point is that on knight e7, rook f7, queen e8, which works like a dream in the other position, here white has the spectacular bishop takes a7 check. And we'll see that this makes all the difference in the world. So now if king to c8, rook e7, b6, here, funny enough, queen f3 is okay. The idea of going to h3 and then takes, and okay, this is just going to be a disaster in the end. If rook to g3, see if you can figure out what white should play here. Okay, well, knight to b6 would be mate except for king takes c7, so we should play knight to b5. And black can't play rook takes c7 because it would put his king in check. And if rook h3, knight b6 is mate. So knight to g3 check, king h2, queen h5. Okay, gets the queens off. But at the end of the day, white's up a pawn, and his pieces are all crashing through. Black is lost. Alright, so after bishop takes a7 check, the better move is king takes a7. Now, b6 check, a6, and here comes white. So if c takes b6, then queen to b1. So we swing the queen over here, a7, and this is just utter demolition. And after a6, if queen takes f7, then we just play ab, comparatively quiet move. And black is getting mated. Well, I'm not sure he's getting mated, but he's losing just unbelievable quantities of material here. So this would be winning, and that means that black can't manage to trap in the rook in that knight f4 variation. So rook d to f8 is what my opponent played, and now finally I played b6. Okay, so c takes b6, a takes b6, a6, and now figure out what white to move should do in this position. Very interesting position. I spent, 15, 20 minutes, something like that, trying to figure out what to do here. Okay, so I'll let you spend some time. Of course, you should stop the recording, not wait for me. Okay, well, here's what I spent the most time on, and it's probably the best move, objectively speaking, and it's rook takes a6. And I kind of regretted showing you the variation earlier with rook takes a6 because it might have primed you for this. So anyway, rook takes a6 is really amazing, and I'll show you some fantastic lines I looked at, and some lines that I didn't look at in the game. Okay, so one of my main lines doesn't work, but it's really quite attractive as this. So okay, well first I'll show you the basic point, which does work. So if b takes a6, simply knight a5, and black is pretty much defenseless here. So rook takes f5, we just recapture, and there's not really much that black can do about the simple threat of queen takes a6, followed by b7, and then queen a7 or a8 check, and so on. So, for example, knight e7, queen a6, rook d8, b7, what to do. Basically nothing. I mean, this is just a quick forced mate. So b takes a6 is bad. Knight f4. Okay, so this I considered. Queen f1. Rook takes f5. And now, okay, one of the fun lines I looked at was rook a8 check. King a8, queen a1, king b8. I'm down 2 rooks here, so might as well give up the queen as well. And now, if this, then this is a really fun mate. Unfortunately, of course, black can play king to a8, and here I get a bunch of material back, but it's not enough. And it looks like, even though the position seems not too bad for white at first glance. I mean, I'm down the exchange in a pawn, but my f-pawn is good, and I'm going to win his h-pawn too whenever I want. But it looks like, with some nice tactics, black wins. So rook e2 is good. Takes. Now rook f2. Check. And then knight takes d5. And my f-pawn isn't going anywhere, and I just lose in this position. So, okay, I didn't see all of this, but I didn't really see any clear win for me here, and kind of had my doubts about it. And then I also saw another line that I'll show you later. But white has some other possibilities here that are all very interesting. Okay, so there's also just taking the rook. Again, b takes a6, knight a5 is good. So let's say queen f5. Again, rook a8 check doesn't work, because here, if I play knight to b5, threatening knight to b6 mate, he just plays knight takes d5. So that doesn't work in this case. But I could play rook to a7. And now black is in serious trouble. I think there's just really one way for him to get out of this with his skin intact. All right, it's really a fantastic move, and it's knight h3. Okay, so this gets there just in time. And if I play g takes, then of course he has queen f3 check, and then he can take things, and he's okay. So I have to play rook takes b7, and this is a perpetual check. So king takes b7, knight a5. King can't go to a8 because of queen a6, so he's got to go to b8. Now I can't play queen to a6 because knight f2 check and bishop f4 check, and my king gets ripped up. So I have to repeat with knight c6, king b7, and so on. Alright, so that's e takes f5. That doesn't quite work. Okay, how about rook to a7? Well, once again, the spectacular knight to h3 does the job. I probably have nothing better than ef, then queen f5, and again, I have to bail out with this perpetual check. Pretty cool. Okay, another idea is to play rook a5. So, it's fun sacrificing this rook, but I don't have to do it. And the idea is to play queen a1 and deliver mate on a8. Okay, it's great work if I can get it, but once again, black has an unbelievable defense. Okay, this is just an incredible variation, which I definitely did not see during the game. So knight h3, g takes h3, rook f2. So trying to divert my queen from the a file, and if queen takes f2, queen h3, and black is in good shape. So queen a1. Now rook f1 check, queen takes f1, and now a really spectacular move, bishop to c1. I mean, this looks just completely idiotic, but the point is, okay, if I play queen c1, then he takes on h3, and let's say I go for my mate with queen to a3, and queen f3 check, queen h5 check, and now my king gets dragged to the g file with and allowing rook to g8 check, and my king is either going to get dragged to its death, or I'm going to lose everything in the world to stave it off. So this is winning for black. So after the amazing bishop to c1, I have to do something else, like knight to b5. And it looks as if maybe white's going to have a small advantage at the end of all of this. So rook to g8, threatening rook to g1 check, so I need to take. Queen to g7. And now I need to go over to defense here with rook a1. Now bishop to e3. And at the end of the day, it looks like white ends up with a very, very small edge. Really kind of an unclear position. So material is even. Both sides have things that they have to be careful about, and it's just tough. And certainly this is far from a win. But anyway, I think there's practically no chance of us reaching this position in the game. Maybe a player like Anand could find a variation like this. I think even regular GMs need not apply. At any rate, that's knight f4. So we looked at b takes a6, which is just obviously bad, and knight f4, which is very, very murky, but seems to be equal. Another possibility is to play rook takes f5, and after e takes f5, here I'll show you the variation which made me reject it, which was e4. So this was the idea, e4, and now on queen f1, b takes a6, knight a5, and now e3 messes up that line that I had planned. So now b7 is not as dangerous because he has knight a7. So this is why I rejected it. And this variation is actually correct. However, I can play knight takes e4 and still get a draw. So I saw knight takes e4. The problem here is that after b takes a6, knight a5, he has queen to b5. So my knight on c3 prevented that. And so I just thought, okay, well, he's got this. I can't have anything here. But actually, it's a draw. So it's surprising that I have that. But since I needed to win the game anyway, even if I had seen how I was drawing this, I still wouldn't have done it for that reason, or at least I would have probably avoided it. So knight c6 check, king b7, c4, queen a4, and now queen c3. So it hits the rook in the corner while supporting once again this knight a5 idea. So this seems to draw. Rook e8, knight a5 check, and okay, king b8, knight c6, king b7, knight a5, and so on. If black were to try to win with king a8, then he loses. b7 check, king b8, knight c6 check. So it's a very nice move. King b7 is forced, otherwise I queen. Queen to b2 check, queen to b8 check, and then queen to b7 mate. And likewise, if after knight to a5, king b8, knight c6, if he tries king a8, same thing. b7, queen b2, followed by queen to b8, and then queen to b7. Okay, so that would have been a draw, of course, assuming black plays king to b8 and king b7. Okay, so those are some really neat variations. Again, I saw some of them, didn't see everything, but saw quite a lot. All right. Anyway, not seeing anything clear in that line that I just showed you with e4, e5, e4, e3, I finally, with a slightly heavy heart, played knight to a5. Oh, I can also say that queen f3 might be okay, just a normal move, and the position is probably roughly equal here too. But anyway, I played knight to a5 with ideas like knight takes b7 and knight to c6 check on the agenda. So one neat variation in particular that I saw was if knight to e7, okay, of course I could play rook f3, but my idea was to play knight takes b7. All right, well, what now? If knight takes f5, my neat idea was to play the knight back to a5. And if knight e7, queen a6, and again, this b7 business is just catastrophic for black. Okay, another idea for black is to play rook takes f5, keeping the knight covering the c6 square. Well, now I play rook takes a6. And, all right, black's best is probably to play, well, okay, my threat here is to play, well, I'll show you, or I'll let you guess it. Okay, if rook takes f2, what does white do? Okay, the answer, I believe, is rook to a8 check. If king takes, then queen a6 is mate. And if king takes a8, then queen a6, queen a7, and queen a8 finishes the job. So, okay, after rook takes a6, black plays queen takes b7. And now, rook to a7 is tempting, but probably bad after rook takes f2. So, the better move, anyway, the better move here is to play e takes f5. Just grab this and keep the threat of rook a7 on tap here. So knight f4, queen b5. Let's say this. Okay, now trades. Queen d7, threatening queen to c7 mate, among other things. But it looks as if black once again has a little miracle here. And now bishop g3 with perpetual check. So this I certainly didn't see. And okay, you could have taken perpetual, where you can go for this, which is about equal. Okay, fun stuff. Another line after knight takes b7 is queen takes b7. This, of course, I calculated too. Rook a6, knight f5, rook a7. E takes f5 is possible too, and that also will lead to a perpetual. So rook a7, knight f to g3 here, rook f2, takes, and now queen to b5. And the idea is just to play queen c6 or queen d7 and kind of swing around back and forth there and get a draw. So if black tries, for example, rook to f7 to keep my queen off of d7, then I draw like this. So check, and just check, and I can just keep following this way. And note that, of course, black may not be able to play king c6 because of queen e6 perhaps, and also just queen c6. And if his king goes to d8, then queen a8 check. So that's not going to win for black. And if rook h7, queen c6 check, and this is another perpetual. Okay, so anyway, it shows that even after knight e7, knight takes b7 doesn't win, but it's very dangerous for black. He has to find some really neat lines. But my opponent didn't play this, so he played knight to f4, which is a good move, probably the best move. Here I could play queen c4, but I played queen f1, still with, want to keep my queen where it's hitting. Okay, no, that's right. Yeah. The reason why I didn't want to play queen c4 was that I didn't like after knight to e7, it would encourage him to perhaps play rook to c8. So I didn't really want to encourage him to do that. That might help, especially since I want to play knight c6 in some lines. So that was the main reason why I didn't play queen c4. So I played queen f1. Also, there's some lines where maybe my queen on f1 there'll be some tactic where I can take advantage of an unprotected rook on f8. But really the main idea was that I didn't want to encourage him to think of an idea like knight e7 followed by rook to c8. But objectively, probably queen to c4 is better. Okay, so rook takes f5, e takes f5, and okay, again, I was hoping for knight e7, and then I would play knight takes b7. But it looks as if, again, black is okay. So queen b7, rook a6, knight e takes d5, rook a7, queen c6, takes, and because of the pressure against g2, I'm kind of constrained in what I do. I can play b7, and this position is probably about equal. So, I could still play, still something to fight for, but black is at least objectively okay. The best move, though, for black is bishop to d8. Oh, I should point out one other thing. Okay, of course, black should not play queen takes f5. See if you can figure out why. Okay, the answer is pretty simple. Knight c6 check. If king to a8, then rook takes a6, ba6, queen a6, and it's mate next move. We can do it this way just to be non-greedy. Anyway, back here, if b takes c6, then queen a6, and there's no answer to queen a8 mate. So knight e7 is playable. Queen f5 is a blunder, but really good is bishop to d8. And this I didn't even see. My opponent saw it. Fortunately for me, he rejected it. It looks as if I'm just going to be a pawn down here. So it's not like the game is over by any means, but black should be okay. So probably my best is g3, and then knight to e4. Again, black should resist temptation with queen takes f5. It looks good here because the queen is threatening the knight on an e4 and threatening queen f3, but still knight a6 and queen a6, and black is lost. So he can certainly make it last quite a while, get a lot of checks with knight g3, but after king h2, knight f1, king g1, king f1, now this, so more tricks. White can finally liquidate favorably with this. Okay, if king takes, knight f6 check. Big important point there. And on rook to g6, then of course I cash in. He gets one piece back. But here I should be able to keep my c-pawn and win the ending without too much difficulty. Okay, so that was a long variation that started with queen takes f5. But again, if black resists temptation and plays rook to f8, then I think he's okay. Again, basically, I think he enjoys a clear pawn up here. So my tricks with knight c6 and the like seem to come up short. So this would have been tough if he had found this. But in the game he played rook to f8, which again looks quite natural, quite logical. And you might think, well, why play bishop to d8 when taking on b6 would just open the b file for white? So perhaps that also was a motivation. But now I had a nice little combination. See if you can figure out what it is. Well, it's knight to c6 check. Again, king to a8 just gets mated by rook takes a6. And after b takes c6, I don't play queen takes a6 because of queen to b7, but I play b7. And now black has to play very carefully. The best move here is queen takes b7. And after rook to b1 to play knight takes d5. And at the very most, white is a little bit better after something like takes, say g4, or take the queen first. And okay, in a position like this, I mean, black has got just a ton of material for the queen. He has a rook, knight, and 3 pawns. Okay, maybe 2 pawns really, because I can grab the h-pawn, the pawn on h2, more or less at my convenience. And his king is exposed. I mean, I can play c3 and kind of reopen some lines against his king. But basically, lines like this or similar lines enable black to keep putting up a fight here. I mean, I could also play after knight takes d5, maybe queen takes a6. It's another possibility. But in all of these lines, actually no, queen a6, he plays knight to b6. That's the problem. So I can't do that there. So black is still holding on pretty well there. But fortunately, he played c5. And I think he expected maybe queen takes a6, queen takes b7, rook to b1, maybe some line like this, and then takes, knight d5. So I imagine he had in mind a variation like this, where again materially he's okay. He's got a rook, knight, and 2 pawns for the queen, and his king is reasonably safe. So instead of that, though, I played b takes c8 and made a rook just to be funny, and also because our queens were on the board, so I didn't want to go chasing anything. So I just made a rook. Of course, he has to recapture, so it comes to the same thing. And now queen a6 check, and he's just dead here. So he plays king d8, queen to b6 check, accurate move, king e8, rook a7. Okay, so not rook to a8 check, but rook a7. And his king is, well, he's kind of trapped here. I mean, his queen is short of squares and the king too. So, for instance, if he plays queen to d8, whoops, queen to d8, then there's queen to c6, mating. If he plays queen to c8, then, let's see, what do I do here? Looks like this works. Queen to b5 check, if nothing else. King to d8, queen to a5 check, king to e8, and then rook to a8 is winning. Okay, so that's simple enough. Okay, what else? If he plays queen takes on f5, then we do this, let's see, what's best? Looks like there are a lot of promising moves here. I'm sure I'm missing something really simple. Yeah, okay, this is simple. It's just like the game. Queen to b8 check, bishop to d8, queen to b5 check, queen d7, queen takes d7 is mate. So he played the move I expected here, played bishop to d8. And I played queen to b8. And again, he's remarkably short of squares. So, what can you do? He could try maybe to play rook takes f5, but I take the queen. And although materially, okay, he's in bad shape, but not catastrophic shape. I mean, he's got a rook and 2 pawns for the queen. Unfortunately for him, the problems aren't over. So I have queen to b5 check. Now, if his king goes to c7, then queen c6 check is great. And if he plays king e7, then bishop to h4 check, and all of a sudden he's got new problems, and he's got to cough up the exchange, after which the position is completely hopeless. So, after queen to b8, he played queen takes f5, just letting me finish the game in a nice way. So queen to b5 check, and he resigned, because as we saw earlier, queen d7, queen takes d7 is checkmate. So, a very fun game. Certainly some mistakes in it, but I think the wonderful tactical lines, especially with rook takes a6, should more than make up for whatever offense you take at the errors I committed earlier. So, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, those of you who like strategic chess, what can I say? Sorry. Sometimes I play that way, but more often than not, my games get dragged into these tactical battles, and well, it makes the game entertaining. But I certainly have nothing against strategic chess, and from time to time I win games in that style as well, or occasionally lose them, though we try to avoid that. Anyway, thank you once again, and I'll see you next week. And I think next week we'll probably do a viewers games show, so you'll get a break from me and my tactical melees. Anyway, thanks. One more thing. Don't forget to check out my blog, especially now. Actually, this is important. So my blog is at chessmind.powerblogs.com, chessmind.powerblogs.com. And the important point is that PowerBlogs is closing, so I have to find a new home for my blog. I think I know where it's going to go, but I haven't made it official just yet. So you definitely want to check out my blog, both because I think it's very good and you'll enjoy it, but also because you'll want to check to see where I point you to for its successor, since it won't be around for in about another month. So November 30 or 29, it just closes up. So make a note of my current location and keep track over the next few days so I can give you the new location. All right. Thanks again. See you next week. Bye-bye.